Welcome to the Lowcountry Revolutionaries, the podcast that dives deep into the heart of Charleston, South Carolina's vibrant entrepreneurial scene. I'm your host, Bill Bellott, founder of Veritas Exoscience, and each week we're spotlighting the boldest innovators from the Chucktown startup community. These are the visionaries pouring their heart and soul into the businesses that are transferring Charleston into a global hub of creativity and American ingenuity. Get ready for raw, real conversations with the trailblazers shaping our city's future. Let's dive in. I would like to welcome Tom Keppeler. Tom is the founder of Obsidian Comms Content and Coaching. He's a strategist, storyteller, and a coach who helps leaders communicate with clarity, confidence, and consciousness. With more than 25 years of experience in brand strategy, executive communications, and public relations, he's worked across sectors from healthcare and technology to nonprofit advocacy and education, guiding leaders and organizations to articulate their purpose and build trust through authentic expression. Welcome, Tom. How you doing?
I'm doing great, Bill. How you doing? Thanks for having me on.
Well, don't grade me too harshly. I can't do any of those things that you teach people how to do. So, we'll have a coaching session maybe after this.
I can't wait. I'll put you through the paces.
Oh, I appreciate that. So, Tom, tell me about Obsidian. So you do a lot of things here. Comms, content, and coaching. That's a lot of scope. So what is your thing?
Yeah, so I tend to work with founders and nonprofits and mission-driven organizations primarily to help them hone and own their story, right? Nice. And figuring out however that plays out. So that could be their elevator pitch, that could be their pitch deck, that could be their website, could be long format storytelling like podcasts, what have you. However they are expressing their voice as an individual or as an organization, I've got a solution for them.
Nice. I love that. That is great, because sometimes the hardest thing to do is to talk about yourself. It's a little easier to talk about your organization or your mission, but especially talking about yourself. So what are like some of your, I don't want you to give away the secrets, but what are some of your strategies for people to help them kind of get over that?
Yeah, absolutely. So I worked for 2 Fortune 500 companies along the way, doing global media relations for them. And along the way, I picked up that the traditional methods for media training made an executive sound just like everybody else.
Right.
And they weren't telling authentic stories. They were speaking with facts and not emotion. And I left that world in 2022 and went out on my own with Obsidian. And that commitment to authentic storytelling is really what came along with me, is to say, how can we sort of fly in the face of this notion that you've got to sound like everybody else to do a media appearance. You should sound like yourself, and you should speak from the heart. And that's what I really try to help individuals and organizations do.
Yeah, that's awesome. My family and always taught me this, especially my grandfather. He's like, he always taught me, it's like, well, if you tell the truth, you won't have to remember anything.
Right. Absolutely.
And that sort of gets to your, like, be authentic, just be yourself and tell your story. Absolutely.
Right. Exactly. That's exactly it. My grandfather was, boy, could he spin a yarn. And he was not a truth teller all the time. He came from a long Irish tradition of a lot of malarkey. But he had an ability to tell a story that was very compelling.
Right.
And my parents had that, and I had some wonderful mentors and teachers along the way who could just captivate you by telling a story. And that's what I think we need to do, whether you're fundraising, whether you're friend raising, whether you're trying to scale and grow or attract investors or participants in whatever your organization is doing. You have to tell a story, and it has to connect on an emotional level.
That's great. I love this. So I have a curiosity question. It's
sure.
not quite off topic, but it may be different. So I think myself, and probably like a lot of other people around here that are founders and stuff like that, may have at one time or another been approached by someone, usually through email, and say, hey, let me help you write a book about yourself. That'll help you sell who you are. Tell me what your thoughts is on that.
There's a lot of that going around. I hate the unsolicited, connection requests on LinkedIn, or if somebody is able to scrape your email address
Right.
off your website. That's never been how I go about getting business. That type of lead generation is casting a wide net for very few fish.
Right.
You know, you think about how many founders out there are really going to follow through on having somebody else write a book for them.
Yeah.
Those numbers approach zero pretty
Right.
quickly. So that's why they're casting such a wide net. But I don't like that approach, and I don't acknowledge requests like that. I have very close friends, business associates who I've worked with for, oh gosh, coming up on 8 or 9 years, who are book writers. They have written a Wall Street Journal bestseller about medical misinformation, and they are the real deal. And how they get business is by word of mouth,
Right.
and by hitting the pavement and building relationships. And that's what you've got to do in this line of work.
Oh yeah. I mean, I know I wouldn't be comfortable with working with someone that I didn't have some sort of personal relationship with. It's like, I need to know who you are, and I need to have gone to your house, or you need to have come to my house, and we need to have eaten together at least once,
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, you got to break bread with the people who are entrusted to tell your story. I mean,
Right.
and that type of trust, I take that very seriously. I'm not writing books for people, but I sure as heck am helping them develop their core messaging and their communication strategy and all these things. That takes a lot of trust, and we've got to get to know each other so that I can be an extension of your voice,
Right.
and sort of, really get to a point where I can reflect your story back to you in a way that is concise and makes sense.
Yeah. So, probably a lot of small companies like mine have done the thing where, hey, I put up a website, I have a LinkedIn presence, I have a LinkedIn page for my company and for me. I'm putting stuff out there. So what else is there to do, Tom? I'm done, right? So where do I start?
Rarely. I think that it's so common to put up a website or a LinkedIn profile and just say that box is checked, that work stream is done,
Right.
and it never needs to be revisited again. And I disagree with that vehemently. Those should be living documents that grow and morph as the organization changes. Now, ultimately, your offering, your core narrative should never change.
Right.
But looking at it with a fresh set of eyes on a regular basis can help you really see where and how the story can be updated, added to, and refined.
Right. But, I will say I love this. I'm a small company, like a lot of them out there. It's like, I can't
Sure.
afford a full-time comms person. So how do I interact with someone like you who's, you've come from big company world, you do this full time. How can I interact with you and get your expertise at an approachable price?
Yeah, absolutely. I've thought of myself since 2022. Obsidian has gone through a number of different lifetimes and what have you, but I've always thought of myself as a fractional. And
Nice.
by that I mean, put me to work for a small retainer, make me an integral part of your team, but I don't need to be full time on your team to make a contribution. So that's one way of looking at it, is by working together on a retainer basis with a small set of hours, so I can be available for advice and counsel and writing and what have you.
Nice.
The other thing that we can do together is a messaging workshop, and the output from that, and that's usually about a half day workshop. The output from that is, reflecting back to you what your mission, values, purpose, and key differentiators are, in a document that also contains a communication style guide, a brand voice
cool.
guide, and what have you. And so that's a powerful and durable document that you can then use to create your newsletters and your website, whatever. It's got all the core messaging and key talking points in there that you could really use as a springboard to develop all of your other content.
Right.
So that's entry level stuff, and that's a powerful exercise. It's an exhausting half day for both of us.
Right. But that is amazing, because that's I'm going to say what a lot of people do is, we use some sort of AI tool to do a lot of our branding and come
Sure.
up with our comms and all that kind of stuff. But AI is like any other kind of piece of tech, garbage in, garbage out. Having what you just said, having a branding style, knowing what your core principles are, knowing what colors are the ones you really want to work with and how you want things portrayed. Now you can utilize something like AI to kind of give you a boost there versus it just going whichever way it wants. That's how I would use it. Have you seen people do that yet?
Of course, absolutely. And I always say it's a person tool person approach, right? It's just like any tool. You have to have the person selecting the tool and giving it the inputs, using the tool, and then saying, okay, tool, what did you come up with? Does this sound like me? Can I edit it into a more human form? It's so easy to go on LinkedIn and look at what posts are clearly AI generated,
Right.
and ones that are not, right? My brand, my offering is authenticity, right? That being said, creating content is one of the hardest things that a small business owner can do, right? So if you can use AI to get you a rough draft and a start for any of your content streams, and use the output from our messaging workshop as a set of instructions for that AI, then you're that much further along. It still needs that personal touch, though, to say, does this really sound like me? Right. Is this something that somebody's going to read and say, yes, I want to do business with this business? Or is it just another piece of noise and clutter in the atmosphere?
Yeah. Is it just more cat videos? Is it?
Yeah. Yeah. We as a society love cat videos, but naming one in particular would be difficult. It's just a whole bunch.
And I think that's a wonderful point. So, and you were kind of trying to make that to me earlier, but it really hit me when you said that. So talk to me about this standing out, not just blending into the background.
Yeah, everybody has a unique story to tell. Everybody came from somewhere. Everybody studied something for a specific reason because it called to them, and they worked their way through a career, through a series of jobs, whatever it might be, because of certain motivations that are uniquely their own, right? And if you can speak from that perspective of what makes you uniquely an individual, an N of one, you will stand out from the crowd. I have no doubt, and I have seen it time and time and time again. If you try to sound like everybody else, if you're using other people's catchphrases and turns of phrase and talking points and whatever, you might as well just stay silent. You're never going to stand out, and it's just a waste of time and treasure to do that.
Right. Yeah. If you want to hide in the background, that's a good way to do that.
Sure. Absolutely. Yeah. You blend in. You might as well camouflage your message.
Yeah, exactly. So when you're first working with someone, do you start with that kind of, okay, who you are and what do you want your brand to be? Or do you say, okay, we're going to focus on this toward let's get your website right, or let's get your social media profile right, or where do you sort of start in this process when you first get going with somebody?
Upstream from that, it's you got to start with the core messaging. What is your company's name? What do you do? What do you stand for? What problems do you solve? And who benefits from that?
Wow.
And if you can nail that down,
that's hard.
Then it is. And like I said, it takes half a day, and sometimes that's very intensive work. And sometimes I'm like, you know what? We need another session, and it's on me. I'll eat the cost of that, but we got to get closer to the kernel of truth. Once you have that kernel of truth, your talking points develop on their own, your key differentiators develop on your own, your mission, values, and purpose develop on their own, and the whole thing becomes magic. And it all makes sense, and it's cohesive. But if you don't have that, you have no business writing a website or a social media post or anything of the sort, in my opinion.
Well, I'm probably in that camp there. So, I'll own that, and I totally get what you're saying. It's like, because, some days, and maybe others feel this way, some days I feel like, well, I could do this also. It's almost like everything's like, well, I do this, but I could do this also. It's like,
sure.
It's like that makes it very difficult to tell someone exactly what you do. If you always have one more thing that you could also do, it doesn't really say what you really do. And I struggle with that right now. How do you help people like myself? It's like who's struggling. It's like, well, I could do all these things, and I'll definitely do work and make money off of all these things if you have this work for me here.
Yeah, I think the common tendency, and I'm just as guilty of this as anybody else, the common tendency among small business owners is to be a reflection of the last conversation you had with a potential customer, right? And it's so easy to say, oh, this customer needed, a Maserati, and all I sell are Mazdas. Well, now I sell Mazdas and Maseratis.
Yeah, exactly. They both start with M. It's okay, right?
Yeah, exactly. And so it's really, I think the most important thing is to hone in on your purpose. Who is it you serve? What do you stand for? And what problems do you solve? Wow. And if you can stick to that and do something that really speaks to your heart, it's this old adage of like, if you do what you love, you'll never work a day in your life. Right. You got to figure out what that is. I started Obsidian as an agency that specialized in coaching around the topic of sobriety because I had stopped drinking. I just celebrated 6 years alcohol free this week.
Congratulations.
As a matter of fact, thank you very much. And then I said, well, I could do sobriety. This is right on the nose of your point. Yeah. I could do sobriety coaching and crisis communications because I've done so many crisis comms in my career. Right. And those two things don't make sense together. And they were extension of things that I had done. Yes. But what they were not is an extension of who I am.
Right.
And I spent some real deep introspective time this past fall really digging into what's my purpose here in life.
Right.
And my purpose is helping people find a voice in ways that I have done myself. It's been an incredible journey over the past 46 years to find my own voice. And that journey informed me with the ability to help people find their own. I consider it my mission in life to do that. And I've built a business around that. And I really enjoy doing it.
That's really cool. That is an awesome story. I would love to hear. We need to have another episode for you to come back and tell how do you got there, because I guarantee you went through a lot of bumps to get to figuring out.
That's a long story indeed.
It is. I can guarantee you it's a long story. That is awesome though. So
yeah.
So how do you mainly? Now I'm going to ask kind of a complicated question here.
Sure.
Do you do content coaching and comms all sort of mixed together? Do you do it sort of as separate things depending on the client? How do you kind of approach it from a business sense when you go to help someone? It's like, okay, here's our 3 boxes. Which 3 boxes do you check? And how do you do this?
Yeah. I consider Obsidian to be a boutique agency, and that gives us the latitude to create bespoke solutions, right?
Nice.
Everybody has a communications challenge. None of those communication challenges are the same, right? So with certain organizations, I've done this messaging workshop, and that has resulted in project streams that involve overhauling a website. It's resulted in let's create a podcast together that really makes sense. The foundational element tends to be the messaging workshop, and some organizations will say, thank you very much. That was very helpful. Right. Thank you for all of these outputs, this mission, core values, all of these things. We're going to plug this into our GPT. We're going to plug this into our marketing team. We're going to create all the content from here. But by all means, please do so.
Please do,
but if you want to continue to work together with that foundational messaging at its core, that's something we can do too. I'm not a social media manager. I'm not a PR manager.
Right.
I
That's
think there are
different.
people out there that do that stuff better than I can, and better more than I have an appetite for. My bread and butter is core foundational messaging and long form storytelling.
That's awesome. Yeah. So who's like your ideal, there is no such thing, but who is sort of like your ideal business size that you work with? Is it the, like myself, solo entrepreneur, or is it like a small, 10 to 20 person company, or mid-sized company that's 100 to
Small to
500, or a bigger company?
small to medium, small
Okay.
to medium.
Yeah.
I have done the large company thing. I've done the Fortune 500 thing.
Yeah.
That's not something that's not a world that I have a lot of appetite for playing in. I
Yeah.
work with a lot of founders
Yeah.
who are a shop of one, who I have an idea that they're starting off in their garage,
Yeah.
and I work with small to medium sized organizations that really are somehow tied to a heart-led purpose,
Right.
and they need my help in helping them articulate that, whether that be something that lands on potential donors or recipients of the services that they do, or on the for-profit side of things, they've got a widget or a service that really helps mankind somehow.
That's cool. That's cool. That's got to be very rewarding, because you get to hear
It
all
is.
these stories and kind of, help people kind of figure out, what does all this mean? It's like, I have all this
Right.
stuff that's going on and I want to communicate it to people, but it's just not resonating with them. I'm not saying it right, or they're not getting it. What's going on?
Yeah, yeah, and so often what I hear is this sentiment, and people put it all sorts of different ways, of like, who I am has no bearing on what I do. It's like, if
But
you're a
yeah,
founder, no, that those are one and the same.
right.
Your personal story, your background, what you've been through, what you've learned, where you've been, has a direct bearing on what it is you sell and create as a business. And helping people realize that, I think, is kind of my mission in life.
Right, right. Yeah, it's I worked in DC for a long time. I used to tell people, because we work for the government for a lot of things, doing science stuff, and I used to tell people all the time, so listen, just because you got a PhD, that might get you a room, but it won't keep you there. And
Sure.
and it goes to, like, your point. You got to be yourself, you got to be authentic, and you got to provide value. And
Oh, sure.
I think that's what we all kind of struggle with. It's like, how do we communicate where we provide value? How do we connect that to who we are? And you talked about doing it in a workshop. How does that workshop kind of structured? Is it just you like one-on-one with you? Is it a bunch of people in the room? How does that work?
It's usually one-on-one on Zoom, and
Oh,
it's
cool.
recorded. Yeah, and then so we'll spend 4 or 5 hours working through a battery of questions that I
Okay.
have designed, some of which I ask everybody,
Yeah.
and some of which are custom tailored to that organization. Um, from there, I spend a lot of time combing through that transcript for those
Mm.
those key kernels of truth and those gold nuggets of value,
Yeah.
and sort of mining that content for, this is what you stand for. This is who you are. This is who you sell to, and these are the problems that you solve, and to reflect that back to a founder or a team of individuals and say, here's what I heard.
Yeah.
Oftentimes they feel very seen in that, in ways that can be very vulnerable, and can also shed light on, give them an aha moment of, this is what we've been trying to say for years,
Yeah.
and we've never been able to arrive at that.
Right.
And
Right.
that's very rewarding. Yeah.
Yes, and that reminds me so much of coaching. That's like some of the big rewarding experiences in coaching is when you're working with someone and you give them that feedback. It's like, well, here's what I heard you say, and they're like, really? you know?
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. And I draw a lot of inspiration from the coaching that I did at the corporate level, and the coaching program that I went through shortly after sobering up. I spent a year learning how to be a sobriety coach, and to marry that sobriety coaching with the corporate coaching that I've done is that there's a very special process that emerged from that in helping people really discover their best self and be able to articulate that through storytelling.
Now, I have some biases here, so I'm just going to say that this is a biased question because I am truly talking out my back end here. So, I would imagine, since you're dealing with a sobriety coaching type situation, and I just liken it to dealing with someone who has an addiction, a very serious addiction, that you're dealing with someone that is likely to lie to you. Am I making that up? Because I think that's a different kind. If you're doing coaching with someone who is willing to maybe not tell you the truth all the time, is that part of it?
I've run into that in every aspect of every coaching scenario I've ever been in. And so often what that is led by is someone who's afraid of the ramifications if they tell the truth.
Right.
And that happens in the corporate world just as much as it happens in sobriety coaching.
Wow.
It's one and the same. It's the fear of being truly vulnerable.
Right.
And that's oftentimes why organizations wind up sounding so much like one another, is that they're afraid of that vulnerability of telling a unique story, because there's some sort of personal aspect in there that would make them feel very seen in a way that they might not be comfortable with.
Right.
And that's a huge part of what it is that I do, is helping people sort of breathe into that, so to speak, and make their peace with it and say, if you aren't seen, you will remain unseen.
Right.
Is your brand having visibility problems? Well, maybe it's because you're hiding from that story that would really resonate with people if they heard that.
Right.
A big part of that output from the messaging workshop is declaring who it is you're not for. Obsidian is not for everybody. Your business is not for everybody.
Right.
And just deciding that really helps illuminate the people you are for, and it helps to work like a magnet to draw in the people who say, yes, this resonates with me because you spoke to me directly and you shared your story. That resonates with mine. I want to do business with you.
Nice. So I ask you a technical question here. This is not as fun, but I have to ask. So when a business comes to you or a person comes to you, do you have like some sort of privacy agreement that you put in place with them that says, hey, you're telling me this, I agree to keep it private, just like if I was your lawyer or whatever it may be? How do you deal with that?
Absolutely. There's confidentiality agreements that I work out with every client that I've got.
Nice.
Because there is that vulnerability that gets involved in storytelling and these messaging workshops. Like we have to get at the root of why it is you as an individual or as an organization do what you do. There are parts to my story that are hard to tell, and there are parts of every organization's story that are hard to tell. But they're important to mine for those gold nuggets of truth. And I think that in order to build trust, I've got to assure whoever it is that I'm working with that, like, what gets shared between us remains between us, and what I reflect back to you is yours and yours alone to share however you see fit.
Nice. I love that. That is awesome. So I have to ask now.
Yeah.
What advice would you have for entrepreneurs out there in the Charleston area, since you've been doing this for a while now and you've obviously interacted with a lot of folks?
Absolutely. So I co-host the Charleston Marketing Podcast as part of the American Marketing Association's Charleston chapter. And one big theme of that podcast is always co-opetition. Because there are a lot of people here in Charleston and worldwide who do something similar to what it is I do.
Right.
And if I look at those as the competitors and I try to undermine them, that's going to work against me. Right. And in a town where reputation matters so much and you bump into the same people time and time again, I think it's incumbent upon all of us to say, you know what, we're in this together.
Right.
And there There are people who do what I do who might resonate with you better than I do.
Right.
And there's plenty of meat on the bone for all of us. I think from what I've seen, Charleston is a location that really embraces co-opetition in ways that Boston, where I lived for 26 years,
not so much.
Might not be doing quite as much. Yeah. Exactly.
Yeah, I have friends up in Boston. It's wicked competitive up there. Let's just say that.
It's wicked. Yeah. Boston has a lot of wonderful things going for it, and like I said, I lived there for 26 years. I miss it at times, but I have found a home here in Charleston.
That's awesome. Yeah, I think everybody kind of, I don't have a boat, but almost everybody has a boat around here. But at least even if you don't have a boat, you kind of embrace the water lifestyle, and I think everybody kind of gets that old phrase of, a rising tide floats all boats. And I think that co-opetition is a great way to kind of capture that in a business kind of sense. That's wonderful. Yeah, I appreciate that.
Yeah. I don't think Kennedy coined that term, but he certainly popularized it. And I go back to that quote. I invoke that a couple times a week. And it's just intrinsic to what I've found to be the fabric of Charleston.
Nice. I appreciate it. Well, Tom, this has been wonderful. We've got to do it again because I've heard you've got a deeper story that we need to dig into. You may not be ready to share it yet, but someday we will.
I've got to, as a storyteller, I've got to be willing to tell my story. So I appreciate your interest in it, Bill, and I appreciate the opportunity to share some of it on your show here today.
All right. Well, have a great day.
All right. Thank you so much.
That's a wrap for this episode of the Lowcountry Revolutionaries. Thanks for joining us as we celebrate the fearless entrepreneurs making wave in Charleston's Chucktown Startups community. I'm Bill Bellot, and it's been an honor to share these inspiring stories with you. If you enjoyed this episode, subscribe, leave a review, and share it with someone who needs a spark of Lowcountry innovation. Until next time, keep pushing the boundaries of what's possible.